This is part 2 of the data entry portion of Module 5 of IDIS online training for CDBG grantees. In this video, we will walk through the process of reporting accomplishments for a public service activity that meets the Limited Clientele or LMC national objective. The best way to learn IDIS is to get hands-on practice. I want to encourage you to log on to the UAT version of IDIS and enter the data as you follow the video. You can pause this video at any time using the pause button in the lower left-hand corner. You can switch back and forth between this video and IDIS by holding down the Alt key on your keyboard and then pressing the Tab key. If you are not already logged into the UAT, pause the video and do so now. You'll know you're in UAT if you see UAT at the top of the screen. If you are unsure of how to access UAT, there are directions at the bottom of the IDIS login page and also in Module 1 of this course. This video is part 2 of the Public Service module. If you want to do the data entry for this tutorial, you need to first complete the Public Service Activity Setup exercise in part 1. I'll be using the data found in Case Study 2 of the course material. You can use this data as well, or simply make it up as you go along. In the previous video, we set up a public service activity. It represented a Head Start childcare program. We will now walk through the steps to report accomplishments for this activity and change its status code to complete. We will start at the home page of IDIS. If you want to follow along in the manual, we are in Chapter 7 for the first few screens, and then we will skip to Chapter 10 for the screens specific to limited clientele activities. Right now, we will start on page 7-1. To report accomplishments for our activity, we need to go to the Projects Activities module in the navigation menu. The system, by default, shows the Search Activities. This is used to find existing activities in the system. If you know the IDIS activity number, that's the fastest way to find the activity. If you don't know it, you can use any combination of the other search fields or simply click Search to get a list of all of your activities. Once the results come back, you will see your options on the right in the Action column. We should see Edit and View. The View function will let you look at the data, but you won't be able to change anything. We want to be able to input accomplishment data, so we will choose Edit. This is the same page we saw when we added the activity. We have two fields we need to update here: the activity status and the completion date. However, the system won't let us update these until we provide the accomplishment data, so let's do that first. If we scroll down a bit to the table in the center of the screen, we will see some buttons for CDBG. The system does a nice job of separating out the data needed for setup and the data needed for accomplishments. At this point, we want to report accomplishments. If you are following along in your manual, we are now in Chapter 10. If you look at the first page in Chapter 10, you will see that the manual tells you which screens you have to complete based on the type of activity you are undertaking. Page 1 will be different if you are counting persons or households. Page 2 will list different performance measures based on the nature of the activity. Guidance for the first screen starts on page 10-2. The first thing we have to do on this page is to specify in which program year the benefits were realized. This is an important point to keep in mind when reporting accomplishments for CDBG. It doesn't matter what grant year the activity is funded out of, and it doesn't matter what action plan the activity is listed in. If the benefits are received in 2010, we will use 2010 in this field. When we do so, the rest of the data we enter on this page and the next will be counted as 2010 accomplishments. The next field is the Accomplishments Narrative field. HUD does not have specific guidance for this field. The best source of guidance for the narrative is your local CPD representative, as this person will be reading the narrative as part of the CAPER. In general, you can use the narrative to tell the story of the activity. You can use the narrative to better describe the benefit and outcome of the funded program. You can also use the narrative to provide details on stalled and canceled activities. If the activity is stalled and has not spent any money in the program year, you may want to use the narrative to explain why. The next field lists the accomplishment type, in this case, people. and the proposed number of units for the program year we selected. If it's blank, the system will provide this number once we save the screen. The next section will collect direct benefit data for the beneficiaries of the activity, including race and ethnicity and income. We are now on page 10-4 of the manual. You can see that the system prompts us to count people as opposed to households for this activity. I'll use the beneficiary data in the case study to populate these fields. The first category is white. First, we report the total white, then we report the white beneficiaries who also identified themselves as Hispanic. To add another row, we need to click the Add Another Race button. The next category listed is Black African American. We report the total first, then we report those who also identified themselves as Hispanic. In the case study, none of the beneficiaries identified as Black Hispanic, so we can leave this field blank. I'll repeat the process for Asian and then move on to the income table. When reporting income for presumed benefit activities, do not automatically report everyone as moderate income. Make sure to use the guidance provided on page 10-6 of your manual. Now click Save and Continue. When we try to save the data, the system will check the race and income totals to see if they match. If they don't, the system will return an error and prompt you to correct the data. If all is good, the system will move us to page 2. If you are following along in your manual, we are in Chapter 10 on page 10-9. This second page collects performance measures. Performance measures provide more detail about who the beneficiaries are and what type of work was done. These will change based on the type of activity you undertake. For our child care public service, we will be tracking the performance measures on page 10-11. You can see that the system carried forward the total number of persons served from the previous page. On this screen, the system is asking you to categorize the benefit they received as new or continuing access, improved access, or access to a service or benefit that is no longer substandard. The manual provides examples of when to use each category. Some grantees fund the same public service providers every year. In this case, the beneficiaries should be reported under the first category as having continuing access to this service. Now that we are finished, we will click the Save button. This takes us back to the first page where we can finish updating the activity. We are done updating the accomplishments for this activity. If the activity is complete, meaning you do not need to draw any more funds, and there are no additional accomplishments to be reported, you can update the activity status to complete. Before we change the status to complete, the system wants us to check that all the required fields have been completed. To do this, we will click on the Check CDBG button. You may have to scroll to the right in order to see it. The system will refresh the page and give you a message at the top. If there are no errors, the system will display CDBG activity pathway is complete. The final step is to change the activity status field to complete, put in a completion date, and click the Save button. Since we're in training, we may get a few errors here. The drawdown is still being processed, and the completion date is the same as the funding date. These are issues that occur during training because we are doing everything on the same day. Chances are, you won't see these same errors when entering your data throughout the program year.